A D.C. appeals court has rejected former President Trump's claim of immunity from federal prosecution. That decision would allow special counsel Jack Smith's election interference case to move forward if it's upheld. A spokesperson for Trump's campaign says the former president plans to appeal. In its ruling, the court wrote any executive immunity that may have protected him while he served as president no longer protects him against this prosecution. In this case alone, the former president faces 3 counts of conspiracy and 1 count of obstruction. Jan Crawford and Robert Costa join us now. Jan is CBS News chief legal correspondent, and Robert is CBS News chief election and campaign correspondent. Welcome to both of you. And Jan, I want to start off with you just on the legal side of things. Explain this opinion and how did the judges arrive at their decision?
Well, as you know, the former president has been insisting in the courtroom, on the campaign trail, that he was absolutely immune from prosecution for anything that he did when he was president. That is a sweeping argument, and it's never been made before because obviously no president has been criminally prosecuted before. So this is one of these cases where there's not a lot of case law on it, and the Constitution doesn't speak to this issue so much of criminal immunity. So this case today, the judges flatly rejected every one of his arguments. They were unanimous, 2 liberals and 1 conservative coming together and speaking with one voice. This means that Trump has lost this broad argument that he is absolutely immune from prosecution. He has lost that now at every turn. The judges said in this opinion that they issued today that, as you read part of it, that he now is considered citizen Trump. So whatever protections that he may have had from prosecution when he was still in the White House, now he's going to be treated like any other criminal defendant.
And is this something that applies only to this case, or could this affect some of his other legal challenges?
Well, this case is huge for some of his other legal challenges, but they were very clear in this opinion to say they're talking about this prosecution, and they're not ruling on some of the other issues, including whether states could go ahead and prosecute a former or sitting president.
And Bob, I know the Trump campaign has said that the former president plans to appeal this, but tell us more about his strategy.
Well, his strategy is not just a legal one, but a political one. This comes as he's trying to wrap up the Republican presidential nomination and faces contests in South Carolina later this month and the crucial Super Tuesday milestone in early March. And he believes that all of these legal challenges actually help him in that effort, in the sense that they are stoking the grievances of his core supporters. And many Republicans are reluctant to speak out about the burden they feel they might have to have on their shoulders politically this fall, should they have to face voters while also facing questions about January 6th.
And Jan, if this ruling is upheld, I know you said, the former president has relied heavily on this argument, but again, if it's upheld, what kind of precedent does this set, not only for the former president, but future presidents as well?
Well, we've seen arguments, particularly on behalf of the special counsel, that this is unlikely to happen again. We haven't had it happen yet. We don't really expect sitting presidents to be prosecuted. But I think that the question is if it's upheld. I think when it's upheld. He is going to potentially ask the full federal court of appeals to reconsider this, and then he'll go to the Supreme Court. I do not see 5 votes on that Supreme Court for Donald Trump. He is not going to, which means that he will be standing trial. The question is when. And I think on this fast track schedule that the appeals court is on, going now even to the Supreme Court, and even if the court agrees to take up this case, we're looking at a trial in late spring or summer.
And getting back to that timetable, in terms of the political implications, Bob, is the former president's goal here simply to try to run out the clock before the election with all of these legal challenges?
There is a hope that there is no trial before the election, but at the same time, there's a belief that if there is a trial, he's going to say that his opponent on the Democratic side, President Joe Biden, is using the Justice Department against him, falsely claiming that. There's no evidence that that's the case. And so we're looking at a political war amid a legal war at the same time. And let's not forget that Michael Cohen has been spotted going into the New York District Attorney's Office. That hush money payments trial is scheduled to begin sometime in March in New York. We still are watching what's happening in Georgia with Fani Willis. You've covered Fulton County so closely. And we're still waiting to see what Judge Engoron does in the civil fraud trial. And all of these could have an impact on Trump politically and legally.
And then in terms of this particular case with respect to election subversion, we saw a federal judge recently postpone the trial date. It was supposed to be March 4th, I believe. So do we have a sense of when this may be rescheduled, or will it be a matter of waiting for this appeals process to play out?
It's still, I think, a lot of it's TBD.
Right, and it depends on if he's going to ask the appeals court, the full court, to reconsider it. So that would affect when he would get up to the Supreme Court. But I think it's interesting that in some of the court papers the special counsel has filed, I mean, he would be okay with the court taking this up and having a decision in June this term. That's essentially what he was saying, that they could live with that, which would mean a trial at the latest potentially would start in July, which means that, to your point,
right around convention time.
Right, but Trump has to be in the courtroom. And so he's going to be then off the campaign trail and sitting in a courtroom. And I expect then you're going to see it play out, your legal and political war.
And the political implications are potentially explosive in the sense that as reporters, we can only do so much to get people to tell us about events, to share documents. But prosecutors like Jack Smith have subpoena power. And based on our reporting at CBS, they've been able to get diary entries from former Vice President Mike Pence, cooperating witnesses from the highest levels of the administration who could bring us closer into what was actually happening before and after January 6th in a vivid way with evidence that we haven't seen yet. And if that doesn't come out before the election, there is a question politically and constitutionally, is the country really getting a full view of what is known out there about the former president's conduct? And so that's weighing, I know, on Jack Smith's team based on our conversations with people who've been participated in this case. And it's led to the standoff over whether this even happens this year.
And then looking ahead to later this week, because there's another matter involving the former president with respect to the 14th Amendment, whether he can run for office, in this case, the Colorado presidential primary. Give us a sense of what we can expect from those oral arguments.
I mean, I'm a big football fan, and I loved Keith Jackson would say, ooh, Katie, bar the door. I mean, that's kind of how I feel this week with these legal arguments, because obviously today's decision that we think will get appealed to the Supreme Court is about whether or not Trump can be prosecuted for his efforts to subvert the election. Is he going to have to stand trial? Thursday, the Supreme Court is going to hear arguments on basically whether or not he's going to be able to run for president at all, whether states can kick him off the ballot, whether he is disqualified under the 14th Amendment because he is an insurrectionist, as the Colorado Supreme Court held. So the stakes in this case, can you really overstate?
You say you're a football fan. Do you have any new reporting on Nick Saban maybe running on the no labels ticket?
Why would you? This is such a great conversation, and now I'm going to go into mourning again. I've tried to process that.
Well, that's why we're going to focus on the Super Bowl, which will be airing here.
But how do you overstate that? Really?
Right.
I mean, the case on...
No, you're right.
It's just...
And it all comes down to the president's conduct. I mean, I remember on January 5th, 2021, being outside the White House, outside the Willard Hotel, and he was calling Republicans, I want you to do this. The question is, was that conduct, was that criminal? Was it criminal because of the intent of trying to stop a proceeding? Was it criminal because what he was doing was using fraud as an impetus to move forward with certain projects? All that could be in the eyes in the ultimate verdict of a jury. But we just don't know if that's going to happen now. But it's amazing how so much comes back to that one crucial period where Trump was driving this behind the scenes. And the question now is, was it criminal conduct?
Yeah, well, a lot of big legal implications to resolve. We want to thank you for your expertise, as always, Jan Crawford, Bob Costa.